The right to offend is not some pesky little part of freedom of speech that we have to put up with. It is the heart and soul and lungs of freedom of speech. It is the coursing lifeblood of human progress. It is the instigator of liberty and modernity and science and understanding. What a laughing stock today's student leaders are, that they can so casually dismiss the right to be offensive without realizing that their lovely, enlightened lives are the gift of individuals who gave offense. Offensiveness is not just something we have to begrudgingly accept. Offensiveness is the motor of human progress.
Now broadcasting from the Right to Offend Media Studios in sunny South Florida, bringing you the latest in politics, current events, art, and pop culture. This is the Whitfield Report Live with Sam Whitfield.
But giving offense is good. In fact, it's essential.
Alrighty, everyone. Welcome to today's Monday edition of the Whitfield Report. I am your host, Sam Whitfield, and joining me today we have Rowan Gibson, who is more of a Bond aficionado than I even am.
Which, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, well, there's a whole Bond, aficionado community, and there are tiers to the whole thing. I guess.
Yes, that's also true. That's also true.
Like, I'm not at the David Zaritsky level. I don't think.
Who is Sam?
Yeah, I don't think anyone really is. So, but anyway, I've been following Mr. Rowan Gibson on Instagram for a while now, and you may recognize him for his Bond inspiration posts, which is where you can find him on Instagram. And you, sir, have had a very interesting story yourself with the James Bond universe. But first off, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sam.
And what's your general background, just to start off?
Well, as a general background, I'm actually already a best-selling author, but not in the world of fiction. Yeah, but in the world of business, nonfiction. So I have three best-selling books published in 25 languages already, mostly focused on business strategy and innovation. So I've become quite well known in the field. I think Forbes called me one of the most significant thinkers in business innovation or something like that. So that's really the general background, which has nothing at all to do with Bond or fiction or whatever. But apart from traveling the world, 64 countries, doing all the keynote speaking and that kind of thing, I've been busy reading Ian Fleming's books for years, over and over and over again. So I would say that if there were ever a sort of faithful companion on my travels, it was my Kindle with the Fleming James Bond novels on the Kindle, and I would literally just read them over and over. So I'd start with Casino Royale, and I'd go all the way through to The Man with the Golden Gun, and then the short stories, and then I would just repeat and go back to the beginning. So that's really where the love of Bond and Fleming came from, apart from obviously the movies as well. But I'm more of a literary Bond aficionado, I would say.
Yeah, that's an interesting distinction. Did you discover James Bond initially through the movies or through the books, or how did that come about?
I don't know. James Bond sort of seeps into our consciousness at some point in life. I remember the very first Bond movie I ever saw in the cinema was Live and Let Die with Roger Moore. I was a very big fan of Paul McCartney and Wings at the time, previously the Beatles. But I actually met Paul McCartney around that time as well, which was incredible. And I was only 11 years old, 10 or 11 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. And I can tell you all about that experience if you want to go there later.
Sure, yeah.
But so my first experience in the movies was Live and Let Die, and I read some of the paperbacks as a teenager, sort of thing that you'd sort of read under the bed covers with a torch at night, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I had these marvelous paperback versions of the Bond novels that were designed by a guy called Raymond Hawkey, who, in my mind, designed the very best series of covers of all time. It's my personal favorite.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so that's where that kind of initial love of Bond came from. But I'll fast forward, and I'd say about 15 years ago, I went through a period of some illness, and I had to sort of stay still a lot. And I thought, what am I going to do while I'm staying still? So I ordered all of the Bond novels again, the whole set from Amazon, and I had them in hardcover and on the Kindle, and I would just literally start reading them over and over. And that's where that kind of modern day real fanaticism, if you will, for Fleming and the Bond novels came from.
What is it about Fleming's Bond in particular that drove you to read him over and over again? Because there are continuation novels and all of that jazz, as you probably will know, but not a lot of people just read in cycles. So
No. So that says something about me. I'm not quite sure it's positive, but it says something about me that I continue to read in cycles. But what attracts me to Fleming's novels is Fleming. That is actually what's missing from the continuation novels. I've read not all, because I haven't read the last three, frankly, because James Bond is not in the books. Kim Sherwood wrote a trilogy, and
right.
Everyone's apparently looking for James Bond, but I don't want to read a book that doesn't have James Bond in it. That's the whole reason I want to read the books in the first place. But to me, the continuation novels, many of them were good, but what they miss is Fleming. I mean, what really comes through with the Fleming novels is Fleming's taste and Fleming's opinions, Fleming's way of looking at the world, and also Fleming's way of writing. So it's not just about a character, and certainly not the kind of action hero character that we know from the movies. It's really about the personality of Ian Fleming that comes through the books.
His voice is extremely distinct as well.
It is. Yes. I've tried to emulate that. I mean, obviously you want to have your own voice, and I think that to some extent I have that. But on the other hand, I'm so seeped, in Fleming and in Bond that the echoes of that come through, I think, every page, every sentence of the book that I've just written.
Yeah. So first off, to kind of jump ahead a bit, I want to say that of all the people I've read, and I'm not just saying this because you and I are friendly, but I think you're one of the best ones to capture Fleming's voicing, as it were.
Thank you, Sam.
The other one I would say is William Boyd. He did a fantastic job as well with Solo, which is a shame that was his only one.
I think so too, yeah. I did. There are a few of the Raymond Benson books I liked, especially one of them called High Time to Kill.
Yeah.
Which has Bond on Mount Everest, which was really different, and there was a very, very good villain in there as well.
Yeah, but that's also like I can tell at least that it's Raymond Benson.
Yes.
Too. So.
Yeah.
But what was it that motivated you? Because you started writing Bond fan fiction.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, so what was it that motivated you to start writing the fan fiction?
Well, there's a story behind every story, and then in this particular case, I wrote a book about 10 years ago. I started writing a book about 10 years ago, which I completed 5 years ago during COVID. I had some time, so I sat and finished the book. And in the process of writing it, I was also in touch with somebody in Hollywood who said, well, why don't you write it as a 10-part or 12-part TV series? So what happened was the book became longer and longer, because when you're writing a TV series, you need a lot of episodes and a lot of twists and turns. So I wrote this book, and it ended up being 200,000 words. So it was basically too long for a book. And then Hollywood was sort of shut down during COVID anyway, to some extent. But then there was the writer's strike and all kinds of things going on. So I sort of left the book there. And then several years later, I revisited the book and thought, well, I don't really want to be writing about this other protagonist. I want to be writing about Bond. So I started turning the book into a James Bond novel. And I was actually quite friendly with Raymond Benson. We communicated quite a lot. And I said, Raymond, I want to write this as a Bond book. And he said, no, stop everything. You're wasting your time. And I said, well, why is that? He said, well, the Ian Fleming publishing group, the estate that owns the rights, literary rights to Bond, they won't touch this. They'll if you send it, they'll burn it. They do not want somebody volunteering to write a Bond continuation novel. They have to invite you, and it's a privilege, an honor. So I kind of swallowed that, and I felt like I'd hit a wall. But then several months later, I thought, I've got to somehow express myself in terms of writing Bond. So I started this thing on Instagram called Bond Inspiration, which, as you said, is fan fiction in episodic form, serialized stories. And it took off from there. Actually became rather successful.
Yeah.
And then
And then there was I don't really know whether to call a hiccup, or did you get like an actual cease and desist from the estate, or
I did.
what happened with that?
Yeah. So what happened was they ran a post asking the sort of fan base or Bond community or whatever, what would you like from us? What kind of books would you like from us? What would you like us to do? And if I showed you that post, it's pretty amazing. There were probably, I think, about, I don't know, 100, let's say 100 comments on that post. And out of the 100 comments, 95 or 96 or 97 of those comments were Bond inspiration, Bond inspiration, Bond inspiration. Bond inspiration should do the continuation novels. We want Bond inspiration, the kind of stories that Bond. So it was all Bond inspiration. And rather than them thinking, that's interesting, let's get in touch with Bond inspiration, they did get in touch, but they sent me a cease and desist letter.
Yeah. That's more or less kind of what has happened with the Star Wars universe as well. There have been some really good, like, Star Wars fan fiction, writers, and also people who do, like, AI-generated films, which some think are better than the, current Disney trilogy, present company included, at least on my end.
I don't think that's difficult, actually, but that's another whole story.
Yeah. And yet, that there have been multiple cease and desist from that, and it's kind of a shame that you got, in my opinion, a raw deal.
Well, I mean, I wrote back obviously once or twice and said that this is free,
Right.
There's no commercial interest whatsoever. As a matter of fact, what I am doing is honoring Ian Fleming, encouraging people to read the books, hopefully stimulating interest in the novels again. So there's nothing that I'm doing that's detrimental to you whatsoever. So, why not view it that way? But they didn't want to do that. They and they have their reasons, which I'm sure they believe are good reasons.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure, from a business perspective too, they have all sorts of things that they have to deal with behind the scenes. So I certainly understand it, but it still is kind of a shame that when you have the fan base saying, "Hey, look at this guy," they do the exact opposite. So
yeah, but that is life, Sam. It doesn't always go the way you want. But actually, sometimes things are a blessing in disguise.
absolutely.
And I have to say, I was literally sick for several days after that. I mean, I hate to admit it, but I don't think I could get up, even for 2 or 3 days, because I felt like I'm doing something that's right here. How could you see this as something that's wrong, right? So they said, you can't use James Bond, you can't use M, you can't use 00 section, you can't use a Walker PPK, you can't use Martini, shaken not stirred, like all of that stuff that we know of as Bond tropes. You can't use any of that stuff. But if you create your own protagonist, you're okay. And interestingly enough, a lot of people at that time, I had a huge, I must say, and I'm going to, if anybody watches this in like the Bond community, I want to thank everyone for the tremendous outpouring of support that I got.
Yeah.
And people were saying, don't stop, just change the name of the protagonist. We don't care what you call him, but just keep on writing because we want to read the stories. And so I decided to kind of get up like a phoenix from the flames and create my own protagonist and carry on.
Yeah. So with Nathan Rocke, who's your protagonist, how did you come up with that character, and what's kind of his backstory?
Well, interestingly, the book, the book that I just published, which is the first Nathan Rocke thriller, doesn't really give us much of a backstory. I think part of the clue is in the title. he's a spy ever after. It's what he's always been and what he always will be. And also there's a clue in the name Rocke. There's a kind of constancy to Nathan Rocke. So we don't get a lot of his backstory, but we do get a couple of snippets that are rather tantalizing because they create some ambiguity about who he really is. And it turns out that his name isn't even really Nathan Rocke. He's an MI6 special operative. He works for a unit called X-Alpha, which is a direct descendant of what was known as the SOE in the Second World War, the Special Operations Executive, which Fleming later called the 00 section, but which I call X-Alpha. So Nathan Rocke works for X-Alpha. He's one of just 10 special operatives. But it turns out that his name has been changed. So Nathan Rocke isn't even his real name. His own name became too well known. And so he was put through an MI6 program called the Clean Slate program and given a new identity, a complete new identity. So there's an ambiguity about who he was before his name was changed.
Interesting. And so the plot revolves heavily around that in parts, I would imagine.
Partly, but I mean, I think one of the things we've been missing with James Bond in, I say recent years, we haven't had a movie for, 5 years at least?
6 years at least.
6 years, right? And then even if you go back to Spectre, in my own opinion, they were already going down the wrong road because they were trying to explore, the inner workings of the character and giving him a long-lost stepbrother and trying to, these words that you sometimes like deconstruct the character and so on and so on. And people were just saying, look, give us a mission. That's all we want is an assignment. Yeah, give him a mission and send him off and let him go up against the forces of evil and win. And so really what I tried to do here is to throw you in at the deep end, quite literally, because it starts out in Bermuda with some diving scenes. But you get thrown right in at the deep end. It's like if you go back to Indiana Jones, that the Raiders of the Lost Ark movie, it just opened with this guy in the middle of a jungle. We didn't get a backstory. It was like, who is this guy? Wow, he collects relics and he's up against all these incredible, sort of things that go on inside the temples and then the indigenous people or whatever it was, and they hate snakes and so on. But we were thrown at the deep end, and then we got a little bit of a kind of a breather space where it turns out he's actually a university professor that goes off on these adventures in between. But that was very short, and before you know it, he's back on a mission. So I basically followed that same kind of formula with the book, with Nathan Rocke. We throw you straight in with the action. You get a kind of a pre-title sequence, which goes on for about 5 chapters, which is quite a lot. And then you get a little bit of explanation about who he is, and then he's off on another mission.
I love that. I think one of the things that we're missing from the 007 world, at least as far as the movies are so far, is that element of fun too. Bond in the Pierce Brosnan era, and even in a lot of the Sean Connery and Roger Moore eras, there was seriousness, but there was also an element of fun. And I understand that the Ian Fleming novels are serious, but like you said, with the Daniel Craig novels, they dive so far into the deconstruction era that they kind of lose their fun a bit.
I agree with you, Sam, totally. And that's the only real departure. I would say there's a couple of departures in my book from Fleming's original literary Bond. One is that I've given him a dry sense of humor, which we got, as you said, we had that in Connery right at the very beginning. Roger Moore took it a little too far, came back with Pierce Brosnan, but I think it was too, they went too much into the kind of sexual innuendo type humor, which cheapened things a little bit. But one thing I will say is that if you meet any of these real operatives or military types, they do have a kind, especially British, they do have a kind of gallows humor about things, right? And so I wanted to bring in that kind of gallows humor and give that to Nathan Rocke, and also to have him sometimes make light of a situation that he's in order to just sort of, get through it, right? So So that's one departure, I would say, from the books. And the second departure is there are more kind of action set pieces that we know from the movies. I think that, since the 1950s and 60s when Fleming was writing the books, we're so spoiled now by Bond, by Mission Impossible, by everything from all those kinds of movies.
Yeah.
That we need some action set pieces, and so I've built a lot of that into the book as well.
Yeah, and I think doing that kind of also distinguishes your character a lot too. I think if you were doing like a one-for-one shot, you could be accused of plagiarism. And I'm sure there might be some people that accuse you of that already, but
Not that I've heard yet, but I'm open to that.
yeah.
But interestingly, on that note, the only thing I've heard so far, which I didn't really expect, was, wow, this has kind of the echoes of Fleming and whatever else, but you have your own voice, and Nathan Rocke is his own character, and he stands out as someone who's distinguished and different. So I'm personally actually surprised by that. I thought that more people would say it's like James Bond, but obviously, yeah, it's different enough to stand out, for him to stand on his own, as it were.
Well, yeah, and that's always a huge compliment as well. I just meant that, like, on the surface, that's what someone might think, because I've definitely gotten the accusation from some of my books that, oh, you're just doing an American James Bond, and I mean, yes, Bond is an inspiration for many of my characters, but I mean, being an American, that's distinct, and there are enough cultural differences between the Americans and Brits to kind of make things interesting.
Yeah, and I went back to the original, Britishness of Fleming's works. I mean, being British, I grew up in the 1960s, in the middle of Bond mania and Beatlemania, and I remember when we had The Man from U.N.C.L.E. TV series and Mission Impossible TV series. Those things were very much of the time. The Cold War was raging, etc. So I grew up in that environment, and obviously I know British humor very well, being British, and it's very difficult to do. Actually, you have to do it right. I mean, before you know it, you become too farcical. It becomes cartoonish and silly.
Yeah.
Or, as you said, on the other hand, you can become too dry, too serious, too introspective, too brooding. So I've tried to find a middle ground that works.
And you also mentioned that Nathan Rocke travels a lot. And you also mentioned that you travel a lot for work. So how much of your, I guess, in real life background has influenced your work as a fiction writer now?
Very, very much. I mean, when I say 64 countries, many of those countries I also went to several times, like multiple times, over and over. So I was very privileged and very blessed with the career, because I never had to pay for any of the flights. I was flown business class around the world, picked up by a chauffeured limousine. It sounds very snobby and so now, but that's been the case. Taken to 5-star hotels, all expenses paid, etc., etc., and then all I had to do was get up on a stage and talk for an hour or something. But it meant that I could live very much the Bond lifestyle without the bad guys and the bullets, and I was able to dress as Bond. I mean, the blazer I'm wearing right now is the Sean Connery blazer from Dr. No and Thunderball, etc. But the shirt is literally you can see the cocktail cuff. It's all I dress that way. I live that way. I use exactly the same shaving products and whatever else, shoes, ties, you name it. So yeah, I've been able to live that lifestyle, and a lot of that I've been able to inject in the book. When Rocke is traveling, flying, going into a Heathrow Airport, British Airways business lounge or whatever, those are the places that I'm used to being.
Yeah, interesting. Now the question, as a Bond star guy as well, are you a Rolex guy or an Omega guy?
Rolex, definitely Rolex. Yeah, this is
okay.
But I don't follow it. I don't follow things slavishly, I have to say. I mean, You know, I mean, most people would say, well, if you're a Bond Rolex guy, you would have to have the Submariner, right? You'd have to have the sort of Sean Connery Rolex. But I defer to Fleming, who wore a Rolex Explorer 1. I have the Rolex Explorer 2, which I bought in 1998 in Switzerland, in Geneva. And there's a little story behind the story as well, which is I was writing my first book at the time. It was called Rethinking the Future. It was published in 96 and then paperback in 98. But while I was writing the book, I had an office in the basement of my house at the time, which was in Germany. I'm now in Costa Rica, by the way. But
Oh, wow.
I put a little picture, if you can see it, but I put a picture of this. I got the brochure from Rolex, and they had pictures of the watches life size. So I cut this life size picture out and I put it on the desk in front of me, and that was my motivator, right? I would say, okay, when this book sees the light of day, I will go to Switzerland and I will buy that watch. And it did see the light of day, and it was published in 25 languages, and I got to do the speeches and whatever. And 2 years later, I was in Geneva and I walked into the Rolex store and I bought the watch. So,
What field in business particularly are you in, or if I may ask? I don't want to dox
no,
you if it's
no. I'm known as and I hate the term now because it sounds so big-headed, but I'm known as a sort of thought leader in the space of business innovation and strategy. So the first book's called Rethinking the Future, which, by the way, we need to do today more than ever before.
yeah.
The second book is called Innovation to the Core. And the third book is called The Four Lenses of Innovation, which is a methodology that I created that's been used all around the world by over 1,000 large companies, whether you look at Microsoft or Coca-Cola or even Tesla or those other companies, that they're all, you know, users of the methodology. So that's what I'm known for. And, you know, you write those books, but the real, I would say, business is in the consulting and in the keynote speaking. So, yeah, hence all the travel. The travel was mostly for the keynote speeches and masterclasses that I was giving around the world.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I mean, if you don't have time, I understand we're here to promote your Nathan Rocke book, but if I may divulge a little bit, because I've also talked to a couple business leaders, and so how do you think we need to, kind of rethink the future?
Well, one of the things that I said in that very first book is that linear thinking is useless in a non-linear world. And you have to remember that was 1996, and we were already talking about change being at a level and at a speed that was difficult for the human mind to cope with. Because the thing is, change, and so compare the 90s with where we are now in 2026, which is 30 years later. And of course, the speed of change is even faster today, far faster than it was. But the truth is that the human mind hasn't got any faster for thousands of years. So we are the same as we were thousands of years ago, but we're trying to cope with a world that is changing faster than we can keep up with. So what do? I think that we have to assimilate what's going on in the world in terms of change much faster than ever before as companies.
Yeah.
We instead of being insular and just kind of talking to each other in meetings and, you know, looking inside at our navels, we want those eyeballs to be increasingly looking outside the company at what's changing in the world, and especially at how that impacts our business or how we might use that change to impact our own industry. So rather than being late to the game, very often it's about saying, okay, how do we harness the power of change in order to reinvent this industry or to drive growth in new ways? That's where innovation comes in.
And that seems to be the entire conversation around artificial intelligence right now and AI. I mean, for the last 3 years, really.
I built a product based on AI using my 4 lenses of innovation methodology. So basically, just to quickly tell you what the 4 lenses are, the first is called challenging orthodoxy. So challenging conventional wisdom, challenging the status quo, you know, like if everyone is zigging, how do we zag? What could we do differently? So it's asking yourself that question. Second lens is called harnessing trends, which I just talked about. The third is called leveraging resources in new ways. So could we somehow figure out how we can leverage our skills and our assets as a company, in order to stretch into new growth opportunities? And the fourth lens is understanding unmet needs, unmet customer needs. So that's where the customer insight, et cetera, comes in. So what I did is I built an AI tool that uses those four lenses of innovation in a way that we could never even dream of before Gen AI. Because the speed is unbelievable compared to what you have to do manually in the past.
Which I think is fascinating. I've caught flack from some people because I'm a big proponent, at least in the author space, of more authors using AI as a tool. I understand why people are hesitant to use it, but like I've put my manuscripts through a few AI tools to proofread it and help improve things, and it's helped my productivity tremendously.
Absolutely. So have I. I mean, I think that you'd be a Luddite if you refuse to use the tools. It's like saying, I'm not going to use a laptop, I'm going to use a typewriter or whatever else. I mean, we have to be of our time. And it's certainly been helpful for me with research, with editing, as you say. But I use AI a lot for image generation, video generation. I mean, I just made a video launched 2 days ago, which shows A Spy Ever After, the book being launched, at the Royal Albert Hall in London, and the advertising on London buses and Heathrow Airport and whatever else. I was able to make all of that in AI. Also, I created a theme song for the book, which most people never do, but I like to do that. So I created a theme song using Suno, which is an AI music.
Yep. I know what Suno is.
If you listen to the theme song, it is phenomenal. So if I made that, Sam, in real life, I would need about $200,000. I'd need John Barry to come back from the dead. I'd need Shirley Bassey. I would need the London Philharmonic Orchestra. I'd need studio time. Producing. All that stuff. And I was able to do this in a couple of hours for $10.
Yeah. No, I'm a technical writer by trade, and I actually went to college for technical writing. And so I took graphic design courses, and I took technical writing courses, and all that was very useful. Right as I was graduating, that was kind of when the AI boom really started to take off. And there was a huge resistance to people using AI. They were like, well, doing it manually is better just because, and I never understood that, because if you've ever had to work with anything like Photoshop or InDesign, you can spend like 5 hours just doing.
Well, I've spent longer. I can tell you this. When I started out with the Instagram episodes, the James Bond episodes, which I've gone back and now basically turned into Nathan Rocke stories. Right. My wife was taking a lot of photographs for me, but we would sometimes spend the entire weekend on one photograph. And I can tell you one was supposed to be, the protagonist in a taxi in New York, and we filmed it in our own car in the garage. We had the television screen at the window of the car with a stock shot of a New York street going by. So we had to film it. So we had to kind of do what Hollywood does, and then I'd have to retouch the entire thing. And sometimes I was retouching one single picture for a couple of days. Yeah. And then I realized that there's scenes that I just can't do. The latest Nathan Rocke story, the episodes, have Nathan Rocke parachuting out of a plane over the North Sea. And he parachutes down and lands on a giant cruise ship called the Iona. How am I supposed to photograph that? How would it be possible? What am I supposed to do? Go out and hire a plane and jump down with the guy and film him, opening the parachute? It's impossible. So I couldn't do that without AI.
And I would imagine even if you have the money to do that, it still takes a lot of time and effort just to hire a film crew, hire a photography crew, just for something like that. And also, doing retouching.
It's the way you do it, though, Sam. I think it's the way. It's like you referenced Star Wars earlier on. To me, the very first Star Wars movie, which of course now they call number 4 and number 5 and number 6, whatever. But Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back were the two, for me, greatest movies of that franchise. And of course, back in those days, special effects were far more difficult, to create than they are today. And interestingly, when the green screen thing came along and all the digital stuff, I think the movies suffered because it ended up being all of this stuff going on all over the screen, but the stories themselves and the acting and whatever, were not as good. So I think that the same is true today, really. We don't really complain about a movie using digital special effects and green screen, as long as the movie's still good, right?
Yeah.
Because in a way, those effects should be invisible. Like if you watch a TV show and it's set in the 50s, and you don't notice when someone's walking across the street and all the cars and the buildings all look, it's kind of like you just don't notice anymore that it's been done with AI, because you're following the story, following the character. And to me, it's still about how it's done and what you do with AI, like any other tool.
Yeah. And that's ultimately what it is. It's it's a tool. When anything becomes part of your workflow and integrates successfully, it can do amazing things. It's when it kind of stands out on its own and overtakes everything that it can be detrimental.
So sometimes I'll have to redo an image about 25 times before I get it right.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes it's straight out of the gate, you get what you want. But one thing I will say is, if you try to use AI to write a book, it's going to be terrible, because the ideas will be generic, the writing will be generic. There's no voice really in the writing. You will find a repetition of the same words over and over and over with AI. And also, even if you're using AI for research, you have to go back and check again and again and again. Yeah.
I will say though, in my experience, the only thing I'll kind of push back on is, in my experience, if I have something I'm working on and I've hit a wall, I'll put in kind of my overall kind of plot for the book or whatnot, and I'll be like, I'm stuck in this area, but I want to get to here. What are some ways I could get from point A to point B and have it be realistic? And sometimes just by having a back and forth, I'll get kind of over that hump.
Oh yeah, and I've done the same.
So
what are some options for this particular thing? And you'll see 3 or 4 options.
Yeah.
But you still, it's like, you asked about my career, but previous to doing all the business books or whatever, I actually started out in the marketing and advertising business. And at one point, I was the youngest global creative director in a very big global advertising network. And, you still need to be the creative director, right? You still need to make the choices about what's going to happen next and where the plot should go. And it's like, for example, I'm doing this new story, as I told you, with Nathan Rocke, and he parachutes onto a cruise ship, and there's an assassin on the cruise ship. And if I'd left it to AI, Rocke would have gone into the cabin and just shot the guy or something, and that would be the end of the story. But what I did was create this situation where Nathan Rocke doesn't know who the assassin is there to kill. And so there's 3 possible targets. So number 1, he doesn't know where the assassin is, and number 2, he doesn't even know who is there to kill. So you create a mystery within a mystery, and I think you're never going to get that from AI. It has to come out of your own imagination.
No. And also the other thing too is, if you leave AI to itself, I've noticed it kind of tends to just chase trends, which Bond, depending on the year or whenever, it's not always in the cultural zeitgeist. So
yeah, I mean, I think they have tried to be. I mean, if you go back to the 1970s, early 80s, especially when we had the big blockbusters like Star Wars and Indiana Jones and so on, you do see that with Roger Moore's movies like A Spy Ever After, that's my book, The Spy Who Loved Me, and Moonraker, you do see the influence of those big sort of Spielberg movies in those particular Bond films. So
yeah,
I think they were of their times. I think that certainly Sean Connery's movies were 60s, and Lazenby was 60s, and Roger Moore personified the 70s to a great extent. And then Timothy Dalton tried to be 80s. It was a little bit Miami Vice and all that kind of thing going on. And then, we had Pierce Brosnan that was very much of the 90s and so on. So I think that they've tried to be of their times. What I've done here with the book, which I think is different, is I've gone back to the classic spirit of literary Bond, of Fleming's Bond, but I've put that character in a modern setting, in the contemporary setting, which I don't think people are doing very much these days. Instead, they're trying. I saw a headline just 2 days ago that Amazon says they want to reinvent Bond. No, reimagine or reinvent Bond for modern audiences.
Yeah.
I think, oh no, that sounds really ominous to me.
Yeah, whenever I hear those words, that's always kind of cringe, that makes me whinge kind of. I will say, I don't know, have you had a chance to play the new James Bond video game at all? First
No,
Light?
I'm not a gamer, never have been, but I have heard incredibly positive things about it. Number one, it sold 3 million units in the first week or two, which was phenomenal. Secondly,
Yeah.
I know a top game designer, and he told me this is top of the notch as a game.
Yeah. Now see, I am a gamer, but I kind of game more casually now. But I picked up First Light, and it is amazing, just like as a Bond project. And if Amazon goes kind of in that direction, storytelling wise, of being fun, yet also adhering to Fleming's Bond, I think it'll work well because that's what the game does well.
I hope so. I mean, one aversion I do have, I must say, is that I think that Aeon was right in the older days when they said Bond should be kind of late 30s, early 40s. He should have a certain level of maturity. And so one aversion I do have is to trying to sort of create this young Bond type character, in order to chase younger people, a younger audience. But again, if they sell 3 million units, they must be onto something.
That was kind of that was something I was really hesitant going into the game. But as I heard from some people who played it advanced, and they told me that it was still really good. So, it'll be interesting to kind of see where Amazon takes it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would still I think one of the touchstones for me would be what would Ian Fleming make of the game, and what would Cubby Broccoli make of the game? So I think they had a vision for Bond in those days. And again, I'm biased because of my age. I'm being a child of the '60s. I tend to still be attracted to that kind of classic way of thinking about Bond. But I have to also face the fact that my generation is aging. And so at some point they do need to have the younger audience.
It's very interesting though, because like I'm in my early 30s, and there are a lot of people my age, at least, in our late 20s, early, to mid 30s, who we like the older stuff because now they're just trying to propagandize everything.
I think so. Yes, I do.
Current media.
Yeah, I agree. And everything is becoming a little bit too political. And I've heard that criticism leveled at some of the latest books as well, that they've tried to be a little bit politically correct. And that's something that I have avoided, to be honest. I think Fleming would avoid it.
Yeah, which I'm really glad about. And I do a political podcast on Wednesdays as well, but like I try and keep my books very apolitical as much as possible. It's kind of difficult because in the thriller, genre, particularly in kind of spy espionage, if you're doing something modern, it's kind of hard to avoid current events. But I try and do it in such a way that, people from various backgrounds will like it, unless you're part of either of the two extremes.
No, I think one thing I've done, certainly in the book, is that when you think about the villains and those that are driving this conspiracy in the novel, it's Russia. It's the GRU, the Secret Service of Russia. they are up to all sorts of machinations, which I think reflects very much. I mean, obviously, there's some stuff going on that's related to Ukraine and the war going on. So there's a geopolitical angle to it that is very, very current, very plausible. But I have certainly avoided to some. I think to a great extent, I've avoided American politics. You know.
Yeah, well, I mean that's kind of a luxury that you can afford somewhat. You know, me being an American, it's harder to kind of avoid that. I wish we could, but it's kind of hard here a bit.
Yeah, I feel like
So
don't get me started, because it would open the floodgates, if we went down that road. But I mean, there is one reference in the book to something in the United States
yeah,
that was a bomb that was put there several years ago with the intention of manipulating, the elections. So and it didn't go off at the time. It turned out they didn't need it, but now they do. So there's kind of a little reference there to some of the things that we hear about going on in the background.
yeah. Well, I mean that stuff all plays for good like espionage fodder too. So the other thing, like you mentioned doing research in some of my writings, like I'm always kind of interested because when I do research and I find out about the GRU and Russia and all that stuff, I found, oh geez, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Like the Cold War may be over in some areas, but some of the attitudes are definitely still there.
Well, I mean, not just you're right, but not just the attitudes. I mean, even the same basic strategies and the same tactics. So, I mean, in the very first part of the book, there's a sabotage operation going on that's led by Russia, but it's led by a group in Russia called GUGI, GUGI, which is basically their underwater sabotage unit. It's been the same for decades, and it's using a civilian vessel to do military sabotage, and that there's a reference to a ship called the Yantar, which is an actual Russian underwater sabotage ship, which happens to be in theater at the time. So what you'll find in my book is that I have endeavored to make every single detail accurate. I'm sure there are one or two things that I may have got wrong. They're a bit too vague. But every single street mentioned in the book, whether it's in Bermuda or Bratislava or whatever else, they're all there. In fact, even the stores that I mentioned on the street are there. And the apartment block is there, and so on. So every single thing, the hotel and so on, everything's there. Everything is 100% as accurate as I could make it.
And having traveled to some of those places, I would imagine, I mean, that really helps, you, I guess, enrich those worlds,
Yeah, and
so to
also
speak.
when I traveled, I always tried to live, I think, the way Bond lived, which is he would sample local drinks, or he would, he was so kind of sophisticated that he would know what to drink in Italy, and he would know what to drink in Berlin, and he would know what to drink wherever or eat. And so when I talk about the foods in Bermuda or in Slovakia, they're the actual foods and the beverages that you would want to enjoy in those areas, rather than running around the world drinking the same drink or eating the same food.
Right. So with this being your debut novel, what has your experience writing this been versus like writing the short story that turned into a screenplay, essentially, or vice versa, I
Well,
guess?
what I'd love to say is that if I compare, for example, writing the Instagram episodes with writing the book, there is a big difference. And also, if I compare writing business books with writing fiction, there's a huge difference.
Yeah.
I always thought, well, it's got to be far easier to write a novel than it is to write a business book. Quite the opposite is the case. In fact, I would say that writing fiction is about 100 times more difficult than writing the business books. Why? Because there are so many elements, so many pieces to the pie. So you've got the characters and the character arc and the the act 1, act 2, act 3. You've got the dialogue, you've got the locations, you've got all of these elements that need to come together and work together. And I've just found that it's And I hate to sort of dishearten anyone out there that wants to write their first novel, but I have found it 100 times harder to write a really good novel than to write a really good business book, personally.
Yeah.
And also, when I compare it to writing the episodes, they're actually rather interesting, the Instagram episodes, because what you get with it's not a visual medium. You know, Instagram is not a it is a visual medium. It's not a text-based medium. So people are used to flipping through Instagram, scrolling. They're not used to stopping and reading a story.
Yeah.
So I did that, and I was quite surprised that people actually opened it out and read the entire thing, and then had engagement and comments and, you know, questions about where this was going to go next and can't wait for next week and so on. But when you're writing episodes like that, you have a 2,200 character capsule you have to stay within. And so you have to do there's mechanisms you have to get right within that. Each capsule has to have a good hook at the beginning, take you somewhere you didn't expect. Then there's a cliffhanger at the end that makes you want to look forward to the next episode. So, you know, you're writing these little contained episodes. And that actually reminded me of when I was writing advertising as a young man. Because when you're in the old day, when you're writing a print ad or you're doing a TV commercial, you have a capsule. You know, you have a page or a double page in a magazine, or you have a 30-second commercial where you've got to get the message over. So I think there's a discipline there that comes through in the episodes. But when you're writing a book, it's completely different. Because rather than having people comment on every single page you write, and I'm looking forward to the next page, and I'm looking forward to the next page, and looking for, you know, you're immersed in an experience. So it's a very, very different discipline to me, writing a novel as opposed to writing the episode.
What was it about Instagram, particularly like as a platform, that drove you to post there your stories initially? Because I would imagine, you know, there's Twitter, there's Facebook, but there's also like, you know, Substack, which I don't remember if that was around when you started. You know, there are all these like long form.
It may have been, Sam, but I wasn't aware of it. And also I think, I don't know, let's see how Substack works, but I don't really want people to have to pay to read the episodes. My let's say objective there, I wasn't on Instagram before. So I was looking for some kind of platform that will enable me to write something that people could read on a phone. I mean, I in terms of my innovation work, I'd come up with an idea about 5-6 years ago, which was that, you know, the dominant medium of the day is the phone, is the smartphone, right? So it's not really even television anymore because people are looking at the phone while the TV's on. It's not cinema. It's certainly not radio, right? Or even theater or any of those things. It's the phone. So if you're going to read something, let's create, you know, an experience that you can have or you can read on the phone. So I'd come up with that idea, and I was looking for a way to do it. And I thought, well, maybe let's try Instagram. And I was very surprised how well it worked. Because again, I was expecting people just to scroll by and not even bother to read the caption that's the story. But I found that people became incredibly engaged in it, you know.
I was very surprised as well, just to, like as a reader, because as you said, like Instagram is mostly like a visual media. And so for people to read your story, which is, you know, in technical terms, just a caption, I mean, it was very encouraging that people were actually reading, because a lot of people just kind of scroll on Instagram, and if they see a photo they like, then they like it. But most people generally don't, you know, read the captions.
I know.
So
and it's even worse on TikTok, apparently. But again, so I've been overwhelmed by the engagement, because again, it's like having someone comment on every single page you write. If you think about the 2,200 characters, it's like a page. And every page you're writing, you've got people saying, I love this and I can't wait for that. And what happens here with Rocke? And I like the gadget that he's using, or, you know, the situation that he's in. And this is just tremendous engagement. So I was surprised, but I like to see those free episodes as kind of the equivalent of the old Daily Express James Bond comic strip, which they ran in the 60s, right? And so you read that for free, and you know, I don't think of it as, okay, this is free, so it doesn't have to be good. I mean, every single episode has to be really good. So I put a lot. It takes me 2 days, 2 to 3 days to make an episode that you read in, I don't know, a minute or whatever. But I want to use that to drive interest in the book, frankly.
Yeah, writing is more of a process than I think people who, are just casual readers. I mean, some of them certainly understand the writing process, but like your average layman, they think that all we do as writers is just, clack away at the keyboard or the phone and that's it. And there's, you certainly can do that, but there's a lot more, planning and effort and elbow grease if you want to write something good.
Definitely, and also the research that you have. I mean, I'm not a sky jumper, or a parachutist. So if I'm going to write about Nathan Rocke jumping out of an airplane over the North Sea, parachuting down, somehow making it onto the rooftop of a cruise ship, which is really difficult to do. I need to come up with a way for him to be able to do that, and I need to describe it accurately enough so that if you are a parachutist, you're going to say this is completely plausible.
Yeah. No, and same thing. Like, I'm into firearms like casually, but I don't know that much. So, like, if I'm having my character John Ryder like pick out a pistol or something, I like to consult with people who I know who are gun experts. Like, what would this CIA counterterrorism guy do, or why do you think this particular pistol would be better, for this job or something like that?
Well, there was one particular weapon in the book that features quite a lot, and it is a sniper rifle that Nathan Rocke takes from a Russian guy, and it's called the Orsis T5000, and he ends up using that sniper rifle quite a lot. And when I started writing, I mean, I've never used a sniper rifle in my life, right? So I'm thinking that he takes a shot and then he takes another shot and takes a shot, but of course in between he has to run the bolt every time with this particular rifle, and so I had to go back and have him run the bolt in between every shot without continuing to say run the bolt, run the bolt, run the bolt. He ran the bolt, he ran the bolt. So I have to figure out ways of saying that, running the action or whatever else, to make it accurate for anyone that reads it that will know that this is a sniper rifle.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned too earlier, and I might be kind of misunderstanding something, but you said that the Fleming estate barred you from using the Walther PPK.
Yeah.
So that's kind of strange because Walther's its own manufacturer, I thought. So like, I don't understand how the Fleming estate, I don't think has a copyright claim on it.
No,
I
think what it is, they said, and I may be misquoting, but it's more or less something like this: you cannot use James Bond or any of the characteristics of James Bond.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can't stop Nathan Rocke drinking a dry martini. I drink dry martinis, right? So why should he not drink a dry martini?
Right.
If he's in the mood. But he wouldn't say shaken, not stirred. That's too close to Bond. So in terms of weapons, Nathan Rocke doesn't use a Walther PPK, but I did find a Sig Sauer, which is a little bit older. It's called the P232, which is an elegant looking pistol. And that is my official pistol, except that this one is modified by, I can't use Q branch. So here's what happens in the book. I can't use, so I use C. C is the actual name of the head of MI6, and it has been for many years. The original C was Cummings, and they just called the head of MI6 C. So the head of MI6 is C. There's no Q branch, so it's called ACE division, ACE, which stands for Advanced Covert Engineering. There's no 00 section. It's called X Alpha. So Nathan Rocke's code name is X Alpha 9. It's not 007. So I invented a lot of things, which, as I said earlier in the interview, it was a blessing in disguise because it enabled me to create my own world, which has been really fun to do.
Which is that's one of the best things about being a writer is taking influence from different, authors and different universes, and then kind of changing them enough to kind of show that, there's influence here, but here's my spin on something.
Yeah, and also there's a couple of things that you don't see in Bond. For example, I told you earlier that Nathan Rocke is not even his real name, but it's part of a whole cover identity that's been created for life. So it's so watertight that you could basically continue with that cover identity. But what it does, it creates a kind of Clark Kent situation,
Yeah.
which I don't think's really been done for a Bond type character, other than, I don't know, in True Lies. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger had that kind of character. I think he worked for an insurance company or something like that. But it's a fresh, I think, approach for a spy thriller.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't had the chance to read it yet. When we're recording this, the book just came out yesterday on Sunday, so I have it on my Kindle, and I'm looking forward to diving into it. So
Well, you literally will dive in, because the first chapters take place in Bermuda at 50 meters depth. So
yeah.
you'll be diving in.
Are you already working on book 2, or what are your future plans?
I have about 5 more books in my head. The book that I wrote, that I completed 5 years ago, still has some interesting plot points and scenes and all sorts of things that I would love to use in various forms, in various other books and so on.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of material and a lot of ideas. I am, just to give you a quick sneak peek at where I want to go with the second book. I want it to open out and have the same impact that we got when we went to see The Empire Strikes Back. I think you have to come in with a sequel that is just going to blow you away,
Well,
and I think they did that.
Well, that's always promising. So, are you planning on doing like books as like standalone stories, or are the books going to kind of interconnect with each other, or a hybrid?
They will interconnect. There is an epilogue in the book that also takes inspiration from the Marvel universe, where I think they had a fantastic run between 2010 and 2020, basically. Those fantastic Marvel movies, and at the end, we always sat there until the end. When the credits were running, we wanted to see that little piece of film at the end that kind of gave us a taste of what we might expect, either in the next movie or 2 or 3 movies ahead. So I built in an epilogue that does that as well. That gives you a taste of what's coming. But yeah, I want separate missions. I don't want it to be like the Daniel Craig era, where everything is related and his emotional arc and whatever else. But there will be some continuation of characters and things that build up and situations and so on.
Yeah, that was like one of my other criticisms. Like, I love Daniel Craig himself as Bond, but everything kind of being interconnected. It was cool for the first 2 movies.
Yeah.
But then once they decided to make the whole entire thing like a circular timeline where everything connected, I think it kind of lost its magic.
I agree. It went,
I guess.
it went completely wrong in Spectre, in my opinion. Where Blofeld says, I was the author of all your pain, and all these photographs up on the wall of all the characters that have appeared. I mean, it just was stretching credulity to the limit. So, and then Blofeld is his long lost stepbrother, and so I mean, that just was completely wrong in my opinion. I definitely don't want to go down those roads.
Which is a real shame, because like I actually thought initially that Christoph Waltz being cast as Blofeld would have been the perfect choice. Like, as an actor, I see him as Blofeld, but I would have written the character in such a way that I think would have played more to his strengths.
I agree. I think this, Spectre as a movie, I really wanted to like it, and there's some scenes in it that I like, and some clothing that I like. But I think where Bond is in Rome, and he goes to that secret meeting of Spectre, and Blofeld sitting at the table, Christopher Waltz, and so on. It was so long-winded, so dragged out, and so slow that I just felt like we'd lost all sense of tension and suspense and whatever, and danger, really.
Yeah. So So then, I mean, that was one of the reasons why I started writing my books as well. It was just to kind of fill in what I thought the Bond series was losing, and it kind of sounds like you did much
I
the
did
same.
exactly the same, Sam. I mean, I felt that we've been in a vacuum. I, don't like the movies anymore. Hated, and I'm using the word hated No Time to Die. Really hated it. I don't even want to acknowledge its existence, frankly. I think it was the biggest insult to the Bond community
Yeah, I
imaginable.
agree.
Yeah, came out of that cinema feeling like this is the real biggest fan betrayal in cinema. I wrote a thing on IMDb, biggest fan betrayal in cinematic history. That's how I felt about it. So, and I haven't wanted to read the latest Bond books because James Bond is not in them. Why? What, are they ashamed of Bond? They have to take him out of the books?
Yes.
That we get books about Q and books about Felix Leiter and books about Moneypenny. Like, well, what about Bond? I want Bond, right? So I felt like we're in a vacuum. I don't really like the comics. I don't play the games. So I got to do something. I got to like grab this by the horns, and I've got to kind of, I don't know, continue the legacy of Fleming. A very kind of like a hubris of my own to think that I could do that. But I felt like I have to save this. I have to do something that's kind of like giving Bond some real continuation.
I can completely relate. And like the other thing too is, and I'm saying this as like an American, but to me, it seems like there's no English pride in the current iteration of the Seven, and that kind of seems a bit wrong to me.
Well, we had it up to, I would say, up to Skyfall as movies. Skyfall, there's the classic shot there at the end with Daniel Craig on the rooftop, and you can see, London and the British flag and all that. And it was timed, of course, for the London Olympics, which was 2012. So there was a lot of kind of great vibe at that moment around British, etc. But I mean, it's been British since the 60s. Like as I said, Bond mania, Beatlemania, they were those moments in time where it meant something. It was cool to be British or London and so on.
Yeah.
And I've built that into the book. I will say that Nathan Rocke doesn't really enjoy going back to London very much because it means he's in between missions and he'd rather be somewhere else. But I have built some interesting things into the London sequence around world building, because where is X Alpha? Where is it actually situated? There's an interesting sequence around how you actually get to this special unit.
Yeah. Well, I kind of find it interesting that you kind of, Nathan Rocke doesn't like being in Britain, because that was kind of Bond in the books too. He would kind of tool around in his Bentley a little bit and maybe go to the dinner club, but other than that, he would just sit in his office and chain smoke, or
absolutely,
sit at home and
felt like a caged tiger or something like that.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's echoes of Bond and there's echoes of Fleming all through A Spy Ever After. Not that it's pastiche, not that it's an imitation, but you will feel those things. You will feel that when Rocke is in London, he can't wait to get back onto a mission, and there's things that he wants to get done that X Alpha doesn't really want to do at that moment because there's an intel breach going on. So they're kind of locking things down. And he's feeling like, yeah, but I don't want to be a spectator. I want to be out there doing stuff. So you feel that. You feel those echoes of Bond and Fleming, and I'm happy about that. I don't see that as in any way something that I should be ashamed of.
No. And I think the fact that you're doing, a tribute and a homage, I think that's the best possible thing, honestly. So like you said, I mean, you had a few setbacks, but I think this worked out for the better, and I hope the series takes off for you. So
I certainly hope so, Sam. I mean, that's why we do things we want. I mean, I don't think that we do, when we write, I don't think that we're basically looking forward to being, I don't know, millionaires or anything through selling books. But I think I see it as a gift to the readers. It's like if I invited you for dinner, I would want to do something special for you, and I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So my wife and I would want to make the experience something really special for you. And I feel when I'm writing, I'm preparing a meal, I'm preparing entertainment, I'm preparing a gift for you, a present. And I want you to feel that when you're turning every page, when you have to turn the page because you want to find out what's happening there, you want to feel like Rowan did this to make me happy, to entertain me.
Well, I certainly felt that way, and I've certainly felt that way for years reading your posts, which as Bond fan were great, especially kind of during the post Craig era where the future of Bond has been unsettling, and then meeting Nathan Rocke through those stories as well. So it's been great.
Well, I'm glad that you've enjoyed it, Sam, and I'm glad that so many people have become engaged in it, and I just hope that everyone enjoys the book. So far, I've had some wonderful reviews and some wonderful feedback. People are already beginning to design Nathan Rocke's clothing, from certain scenes that they're reading in the book and so on. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to all of that.
Well, it's terrific, and I'm honored to be part of your launch week. So, thank you for coming on. I know we've communicated back and forth, for a couple of years, so it's finally nice to put a face with a name. So
the
I appreciate it.
The honor's mine, Sam. Thanks for inviting me. Really appreciate it.
So yeah, absolutely. Any last kind of final thoughts in regards to the book? Anything you want to show and promote?
Well, just the book itself, really. I mean, the book is available as an ebook or as a paperback on Amazon. So it's A Spy Ever After by Rowan Gibson. You'll see Nathan Rocke really, really big. One thing I did as final thought really is I wanted to emulate those Bond covers from the 1960s by Raymond Hawkey, great graphic designer. And so what he did was put James Bond big at the top and then Ian Fleming very small. I've done the same. I didn't want to promote myself. So it's not a Rowan Gibson book. It is a Nathan Rocke book. And so I appear at the very bottom, as the author. But that's really what I want. I want Nathan Rocke to become a kind of franchise that people enjoy. So yeah, that's where to get the book. Amazon, everywhere in the world, basically. Yeah.
And I would also encourage, I know you're not really pushing this, but since we do have people who are interested in, the business world and nonfiction, I'll link your Amazon page and check out Rowan's nonfiction books as well. I think I'll certainly dive into some of those as well. So
I think that you'll enjoy them. The Four Lenses of Innovation it's a landscape shaped book, which is very, very graphic. Every single page is full of graphic design, illustrations, and so on. So it's meant to be a kind of creative experience, an innovation experience as you read the book. So Four Lenses of Innovation, I think, is extremely enjoyable. Innovation to the Core was published by Harvard Business School Press, so it's more of an academic book, but it was a bit of a game changer.
Wow.
Yeah. So nice. Enjoy whatever turns you on, right?
Yep. So, well, folks, I want to thank you all for tuning into this episode. I will again have all of Mr. Rowan Gibson's links in the episode description, and be sure and check out his work and leave a review on Amazon and all that jazz. So
thank you,
Rowan. Thanks for coming on, and folks, thanks for tuning in. I'll be back on Wednesday, and until then, take care.
The right to offend is not some pesky little part of freedom of speech that we have to put up with. It is the heart and soul and lungs of freedom of speech. It is the coursing lifeblood of human progress. It is the instigator of liberty and modernity and science and understanding. What a laughing stock today's student leaders are, that they can so casually dismiss the right to be offensive without realizing that their lovely, enlightened lives are the gift of individuals who gave offense. Offensiveness is not just something we have to begrudgingly accept. Offensiveness is the motor of human progress.
Thank you for watching the Whitfield Report live on the Right to Offend Media Network. Make sure to check out Sam's books on Amazon, Audible, and Kindle. You can follow Sam on X at SamW_NGC and the Right to Offend Media Network at RTO Media. Like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. And until next time, God bless, God save this great nation. God, freedom, legacy, in that order.